Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter. Uh, this is an extraordinary time to be broadcasting. It's One is always prone to hyperbole when uh, you're doing this kind of show. It's hard to avoid. It's difficult at this point. Uh, it's difficult at this point to say that uh, this is an extraordinary time is any kind of hyperbole. There are riots or protests and or riots in at least 30 cities tonight. 8 states have called out the National Guard. There are a large number of mandatory curfews that have been put into place. We There's a tremendous amount of misinformation as well, and one of the things that we're trying to do is collate a tremendous amount of information as rapidly as possible and make sure that we get the most accurate information we can to you. I will say there's all sorts of rumors. Trump has not been particularly helpful in this. He has said that I think he was the one who said that to the best of that he had been told, quote, he gets told a lot of things, which gives him plausible deniability when he completely makes things up. But what he said was that he was told that all of the protesters outside the White House yesterday were, and this, by the way, is a picture actually from 2 days ago, the 3rd Police Precinct in Minneapolis on fire. So I may interrupt intermittently as we see various footage that's going to be coming up here. But he said that he had been told that all the protesters that approached the White House yesterday were all flown in out of town. That's obviously ludicrous on its face, if any were. And we've seen, here's the problem with social media. A lot of people make claims. Oh, well, a friend of mine told me that, who works for American Airlines, that yep, all the planes have been booked with these people that they've been bringing in from out of town, and then Antifa may be involved. Oh, there are bands of militias roaming. There's all sorts of crazy rumors, wild accusations. There may be some truth to some of it. There's usually some truth to at least some of it, but for the most part, we find that it's just what happens when you get a lot of people who are very scared and a lot of things going on. So what I'll try to do is talk about where we are at the present moment. As I said, over 30 cities have protests and or riots. We have now 25 cities that have imposed curfews. The cities that are now under a curfew of some kind: Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, Denver, Miami, Atlanta, Chicago, Louisville, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Rochester, New York, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, Toledo, Eugene, Portland, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Charleston, Columbia, South Carolina, Nashville, Salt Lake City, Seattle, and Milwaukee, all now under curfew. We have 8 states that have called in the National Guard. A number of people are claiming that. So we have Texas and Colorado, I think, are the most recent to have activated the National Guard. They activated them about an hour ago. Some of the protests we're seeing some of the violence that we've been seeing so far to date. There is some footage of what appears to be police officers beating up a man inside a police vehicle. It has been claimed that this is more footage of the original arrest and that he had been assaulted inside the police vehicle before being pulled out. And we haven't been able to confirm this footage. We have no idea. Like I said, there's a lot of rumors. We're going to talk about some of the things that are being said and which ones there's a chance that there's some truth to, and which ones that we don't see any means of substantiating at this time. What we will show you is this here is a picture of Beverly Hills. That is 20,000 people in Beverly Hills in the current protest over there. The police have, this is also from a sort of a more, that's Beverly Hills also on the ground. To have that many people protesting in Beverly Hills is honestly quite astonishing. We also have, let me bring back that, sorry, I find that one really quite, again, that's Beverly Hills, California, 20,000 people. Normally a reasonable bastion of peace and quiet. There was there's a lot of stories. There was one that we had reported on last night that seemed very apocryphal, of a bunch of police officers that were approaching protesters, and then a bunch of white men and women who formed a human wall between them, and knowing full well that the police officers would not be as violent towards the white men and women as the protesters. I don't know how much truth there is to that. That's a powerful story. It's an interesting story. What we do have here is we were able to find this image that purports to be of that. A number of protesters being, I mean, I think you can take it for what it is. So, yeah, and like I said, so what we're doing now, and just to give people some insight as to how we're going to try to proceed over the next minimum of a few hours, I think. We have a Discord. We are constantly updating news in that Discord. I also see what gets dropped on that Discord up here. We're trying to sort of collate that information in real time as much as we can. Things are changing very quickly. The curfews are starting to roll over the United States as we go from east to west, and it gets later. And so we're going to see what happens as these curfews, which they're going to be violated. The 8 states that have called out the National Guard: Minnesota, Georgia, Ohio, Colorado, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Utah, Texas, and the District of Columbia. President Trump has said that he is prepared to bring the military out and have them engage the protesters. That has a number of constitutional issues that I think we're going to end up discussing. In Time does not have its own satellite feed, but we're pretty close. I will say this: I've been very proud of what In Time has been able to do, in large part because we have a lot of people, sort of a community of people who contribute news and who take it seriously, who try to avoid giving us just speculation. And because we are a very small organization, we can actually often be more agile than larger network news, which is why oftentimes we beat larger network news to the to stories. In this case, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. We are trying to collate, like I said, a tremendous amount of misinformation, and the biggie is, I think, that Antifa is heavily involved. There may be elements of Antifa, but I see no evidence that any of this has been organized en masse. And I frankly don't think you could organize something on a large scale like this without it being detected. This is 30 cities across the country, and we've watched it develop from 4 or 5 days ago. It was just one city, and it's grown, and it's irrefutable that there is a tremendous amount of anger towards police departments across the country. I don't think you need to bring people in to do this. I think right now people are so upset, especially in places like Baltimore, Washington, New York, obviously in Minnesota. There's so many people that are genuinely frustrated and upset. I apologize. Hold on. So I'm getting some sounds in my ear as we. a lot of people are very upset, and I think it's easy to see how this can happen. Unfortunately, um, and I do apologize. Hold on one second. I'm going to. Hello, Saka. Welcome. I did send you a DM if you are interested. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. A lot of our regulars are here and helping out, and I appreciate it. Like I said, it's just tremendous amounts of information. We have a couple of more light stuff that I think is worth getting into, and positive things. One of them is SpaceX launched the first astronauts into orbit from U.S. soil for the first time in 11 years. They should be docking with the space station in about 10 hours. COESA 5001. Other minority communities are afraid that the riots may spread into their town. Are they, or are other more like back in 1994, Los Angeles? Your thoughts? This is spreading, and this is spreading quite significantly. I will say this: yesterday, the riots in front of the White House. It was a very intense protest in front of the. It was close to a riot. It was arguable. That it was close. There was certainly some rocks thrown, and that was broken up quite aggressively by the Secret Service and the Capitol Police, as well it should have been, because if that had gotten out of control, a lot of people could have died. That was quite serious. In the rest of the cases, I think we have a picture that I'd like to bring up. Unfortunately, in transferring some of the files, we appear to have lost some. I'm going to see if I can find. I think they went to the wrong place. I don't know what happened, but a couple of interesting things did happen. The Dallas police chief actually joined with protesters in peacefully protesting, which I thought was a remarkable act of courage for a number of reasons. I imagine he's probably not very popular right now, and even if he were, you could lose your job doing something like that. But I think he was trying to send a message, and he was welcomed. And I think this kind of thing affects all of us. And I think there are some genuine frustrations on the police side as well. This doesn't justify anything that's happened, but the police are members of the community. They are affected. They feel, rightly or wrongly, they feel under siege. And I think these are problems we all have to solve together. We can't just blame the other side. We have to come together and figure out how we are going to talk about these issues and address them as a nation. So I think the chief of the Dallas Police Department going and walking with the protesters, just put on a mask and wearing a uniform, walked with them. Again, I thought that was impressive and of value. I think there's going to be a limit to how much this spreads, because there are states in which people aren't as concerned about this kind of thing. But and we had about 30 cities yesterday, and we have about 30 cities today. So my anticipation, Coesa, and I apologize that it's taking me so long to answer your question. My anticipation is that we're not going to see much more than another 10 or 15% increase in cities, but in those cities that it could become more violent. I'm going to give a list of the cities in which there are protests right now. It's greater than would be expected, and Minneapolis, Minnesota is not the place where you'd normally expect this level of violence. Atlanta, Georgia has had significant racial tensions in the past, but it wasn't, to watch the CNN building be attacked yesterday was quite shocking. And all right, I do think we've recovered some of the files here, so I'm going to This is actually, it's not the Dallas, it's Houston. The Houston police chief. And I will say this again, people prone to hyperbole, myself sometimes included. He hasn't come out and made a statement, so it is possible that he was sitting there watching from the inside, but from he wasn't really protesting in solidarity. The story is he was protesting in solidarity. I think we'd all like to romanticize it, and I hope it's true. That's how we understand it. At any rate, we do have a picture of it, and we will bring it up in a second. Oh, of course, now we're having other difficulties. It's never smooth, is it? All right, I'm going to try one more time to get, and I apologize, I've been producing on my own here, which is perfectly fine, but it does slow things down, so I do apologize. Actually, I think what has happened here is we've got the image, but it's actually behind the, and I've got actually a couple of statements that I thought were pretty powerful and I'd like to read, but once again, and if you could all bear with me as I try to, there we are. Okay. So what you're about to see here is an image of that is the Dallas, I'm sorry, I keep saying Dallas, it's the Houston police chief in a mask, in a uniform. It's not trying to be surreptitious or anything, just marching along with protesters. I don't know, I found that particularly poignant. There's another video I'd like to show. This one I'm a little cautious about, and we have a lot of. So we have reports of injuries, we have reports of some attacks, we have again unsubstantiated reports of small groups claiming themselves defenders of liberty that are armed. We haven't seen any confirmation of anything other than a few what appear to be orchestrated photos. By orchestrated, I'm sorry, I don't mean they're fake. I mean it's just everyone's posing for a photo. That's well, that could be anybody. That may be legit. It may not. But there was a report here, and I'm going to try to get sound on this. And this is a. If we can get this up, and we had difficulty getting this one up earlier, so. If we can't, what I may do is try to bring it in another way. There have been reports of the reports that I find the most troubling are that police officers have been joining the riots and pretending to be rioters and actually instigating and making worse rioting. I have a hard time understanding why any would do that. There's sort of a deep state thought that, well, by doing that, you turn the rioters into the bad guys, yada, yada, yada. Okay, I can sort of see that, but I don't think the police want to watch these areas burn down any more than anyone else does. They are in danger as well. I don't see anybody in their right mind thinking that that's a regular thing. But there was a report of a stack of bricks that had been dropped off on a street corner, and that is the video that I'm trying to get a hold of right now. A stack of bricks that had been dropped off on a pallet. There was no construction anywhere nearby. There's just a stack of bricks on a pallet, and I'd like to play that video, and then I would like to discuss the claim being made there, and what I think it says, unfortunately, about this country and where we are today. But I think before I do that, okay, that video is not going to be properly imported. So I think we're going to be stuck with that locked out for a few minutes. So let me cover again sort of where we started, which is that there are now either protests or riots in 30 cities. 25 of those cities have issued curfews for the entire city. That includes Beverly Hills, where we just showed pictures of 20,000 people protesting. Los Angeles, where the protests have turned somewhat violent, and there have been reports of police vehicles set on fire, but no massive rioting that I'm aware of yet. Denver, where last night there had been some fires. I don't know about today. Miami, Atlanta, which was really quite insane yesterday. Chicago, Louisville, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Rochester, New York, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, Toledo, Eugene, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Charleston, Columbia, Nashville, Salt Lake City, Seattle, and Milwaukee all have curfews tonight, and people are being ordered to be off the streets. These are going to be, they each have different start times, and it is currently 10:30 Eastern Standard Time, so we will see what happens as those roll. Now, what we have here, okay, so we have footage of coming in here. There's a number of, so there have been several reports. We have some footage of this, but it looks like we may now have more. There was one report of, actually, no, we have footage of several civilian vehicles driving into protesters. One where the vehicle was actually chasing down a protester who tried to escape the vehicle, and the vehicle was actually swerving to try to hit him. We do have that. We'll try to get that one up in a few minutes. We also have now a report from, it looks like about 30 minutes ago, of a New York police vehicle driving into some of the protesters. We also have footage of where we're not going to air that. We have footage of a child who was hit in the head with a rubber bullet and was taken to the hospital in critical condition. He was bleeding profusely. There's no word on his condition. We reported yesterday, and you will see the footage in this video coming up, of a woman who was shoved by a police officer. That police officer is now under investigation for having shoved the woman. We showed that video several times yesterday. He is under investigation. She is recovering in the hospital, is conscious and lucid. She's been talking, asking people to be careful. Yep, there's another one. Okay, so yeah, we're getting now several pieces of footage of vehicles that have been driving into rioters. It's yeah, and so Los Angeles is definitely having some significant difficulties. In Atlanta, 9 police cruisers appear to be damaged. One is utterly destroyed, appears to have been set on fire. So it's going to be a day, I think. So 8 states have called in the National Guard. We don't have any status as to what's going on with that, and the president has said that he is going to, or he is considering bringing the U.S. military to bear on this. Mr. Page, David Page, in our live chat has asked, do the rioters have any demands? That's an interesting question. Yes, in essence, the demand is change. They don't like the status quo in which they believe black lives are not valued the same as white lives, and these riots are occurring in predominantly in areas where there have been racial tensions, in particular between the police and between the people that they are there to protect. This started with the death of a black man in custody, but we've heard many cases of that, and that happens unfortunately a great many times where a black man, I forget, Ving Rhames, who is a reasonably famous actor, a very, very large black actor, had lost the key to his house and tried to go in through the back way, and as he came back around the front, and then he actually got into his house and was just hanging out, taking off his coat, getting himself, and the police burst down the door and arrested him for breaking and entering. This was his own house, and he felt at the time, and he discussed it later, where he said that he thought his life was genuinely in jeopardy, and one of the reasons that they didn't shoot him then and there was because he's an actor, and he's a famous actor, where the police officers go, hey, wait a minute, I know this guy, because he's very hard to not recognize. So, but he said, if I wasn't famous, it's like being an actor saved my life that day. A neighbor had seen him trying to get into his own house and called the police and said there's a big black guy breaking into the house next door. It was his own neighbor. You'd think the guy knows who he is, and it was. I mean, that's an interesting story, and I think there are a couple other stories I'd like to talk about, but I don't think. I think Mr. Designs is in the live chat, and he said, yeah, they're not that organized that there's any set of demands, but I think overall this is a country that is demanding social change, and in light of a number of people who are very frustrated, a number of people who have been cooped up in their houses for far too long, I think it was just one more incident like this that kind of set off the powder keg. Now, we had spoken 2 nights ago about how we were hoping that the arrest of the police officer involved in this, that his arrest might quell things. It most certainly has not. He is on $500,000 cash bail. His wife has filed for divorce, and all right, thank you, Tony. He is, unfortunately, he had 18 prior complaints, so I think there's a lot. Arresting him is in some cases too little, too late. The question is, why did he have so many complaints against him? Why was he already involved in a previous incident where there was no prosecution in the death of a Native American man? And the thing is, this doesn't happen in other countries at the rate at which it does here. It does happen to some extent everywhere across the world. There's no country that has a perfect police force. There's no country that has a perfect government. But why does it happen here in a way it doesn't happen anywhere else? Why, in New York, a black man is again going into his own apartment. He has the keys. He's fiddling with the locks, and the police show up. They shout at him. They say, hands up. And rather than just throw up his hands, he does what I think any of us would have done in that case, which is he turned around to see who was saying it and whether they were talking to him or not. He's got his back to so he just turns around, which is what if I'm putting my keys in the door and somebody yells hands up, the first thing I'm probably going to do is turn around. It's just going to be instinctual. I'm not going to throw my hands up. I don't even know where the engagement is or if I'm involved in it. He turned around and they shot and killed him. He was unarmed. He was just going into his own house. That's the kind of thing that I think people are protesting right now and that people are concerned about. Now, we have some footage coming in. It should be in this series of clips. There are tens of thousands of people marching in. Let's see. I think where was that clip from? I think we've already showed 20,000 in Beverly Hills, and we've got. Sorry, there's a lot of data right now that we're trying to keep up with. I think when the footage comes up, I'll be able to better recognize it. Okay, so there's thousands in Atlanta. There is Louisville, and we have the footage of Louisville coming up, and we're going to see where that. All right. So what I'd like to do is bring up a couple of other photos, and then one interesting footage. Actually, I want to get back really quickly before we start trying to get a handle on where things are and what's going to happen as the National Guard hits the streets. I don't know how long it takes for the National Guard to deploy. I don't know if they were getting ready ahead of time. We do know that 2 military bases prepared to deploy. military police to Minneapolis, Minnesota on a 4-hour notice. I don't know at this point if anyone asked that they get deployed or if they've been ordered to be deployed. I don't know what the status is in Washington. What we do have here is, so I'm going to show you, this is downtown.
People started to get on the move, and that's where things get
Portland.
a little crazy.
Actually, no, we're gonna wait. That will come in off the. Yep, that'll come in. So we're going to show you a clip from Portland, Oregon, from Los Angeles, and from. Okay, this is, I believe, New York that you're seeing right now. This is about 4 hours ago, maybe a little, yeah, about 4 hours ago, I believe. And we're going to show you, I think after this is Portland. There was, yep, no, this is still New York. Now, New York has, for those of you who are just joining us, they have said they are opening an investigation into the officer yesterday who shoved a woman to the ground. She received a TBI, a severe concussion, went into a seizure, and was taken to the hospital. She is currently resting in the hospital. There is a Twitter journalist, or a social media journalist, not sort of not a journalist for a major network, who was shot in the face with what she says she believes was a tracer round. Blew off a pair of goggles, protective goggles. It blew right through it and clipped her left eye. She is, at last report, prepping for surgery. We're also, I think, not going to show that clip, but we will discuss her in a few minutes. But she is prepping for surgery, and they're going to try to save the eye. But she's a reasonably well known, I think she had tens of thousands of followers, citizen journalist who was out there covering this. We will be showing footage in a minute of what happened yesterday when a local news crew in Louisville came under fire from the police officers with pepper guns, and the reporter and the cameraman, and you can see the gun just aimed straight at and just fired, and that was a tracer. She reported it as a tracer round. Police don't use tracer rounds, so I don't know how or, but I think we should definitely get into that. I don't know how, and I don't know how or why she'd think it was a tracer round. So this looks like New York Public Library is what that looks like to me. I could be wrong on that, or maybe the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I don't know either of those two well enough to identify just right off the bat, especially with so many people there. I would have thought it would be a rubber bullet, but it penetrated I think you're right, and I should be a little more careful with the claims because I'm not entirely sure. This is what she was claiming, but I don't. It was able to pierce the goggles. It may be that the shattering of the goggles did the damage to the eye. So while we're prepping this, I do want to see if I can find, and okay, that right there is Louisville. No, sorry, that is Portland, Oregon, right there, that you're seeing now. And I think the next 15, 20 seconds is going to be all Portland, Oregon. And what I'm trying to get now, and I apologize that this is, for whatever reason, we are not able to bring in a video file, and that may be why. That's why. All right. So I'm going to see if we can find, and maybe just stream off the internet, a video file of. No, you know what? We're not going to do that. All right. So there was in New York, there was a pallet of bricks that was deposited in one of the areas where there had been some rioting. Nobody knows how or why the bricks got there. Now, any number of possible and completely valid and understandable ways it got there. One, legitimate. Somebody was going to do some construction nearby, and there were the bricks. Nobody could find any construction nearby. Doesn't mean there wasn't some, but admittedly, it's a little suspicious. Um, the second, that it was some civilian authorities or some. Okay, that is, I believe that's Los Angeles that we are looking at right now. And I think we're going to see another picture of Los Angeles from another view. Okay, that is, I don't know where that is. And we have a super chat. Let me take a look at that. We do have a few people, by the way, here who have said that they were out in the protest, so we'd love to hear what you guys have to say and what you've been seeing. Fourth Dimensional Jake for $5. I headed into Seattle just after the curfew and saw police walking home. I'm headed to Tacoma in a few minutes, where protests are starting to flare up. Please stay safe. If you do want to also, let us know what you're seeing. I think we'd be very interested in hearing about it, but please be careful. If Seattle hasn't, all the protests that I'm aware of in Seattle have been nonviolent, which makes it far more likely that they will obey the curfew. So 25, there's protests and or rioting in 30 cities. Tonight, the curfew has been enacted in 25 of those cities, and in 8 states there are currently the National Guard is being deployed. So please stay safe, but if you get a chance and want to tell us what you see, we would, I think, all be interested in that. So the pallet of bricks. I saw a meme once where it was a cartoon, and there was a guy, and he's saying, "Oh, I haven't really done much with my life, and I haven't." Oh, good. That's good to hear. I haven't done much with my life. I haven't really accomplished anything. I live at home with my parents, or whatever. Boy, I wish I was important. And somebody goes, "Hey, you can be important too. You know how? Conspiracy theories. What you do is you believe a wild conspiracy theory, and just by believing it, you're going to feel that you're, super empowered and you're smarter than everybody else, and you figured out something that no one else knows, and it's going to make you feel great, and you're going to get endorphins and do all this other stuff." And then he goes, "Hey, wow! So it's like I can be Neo because I can see the truth when no one else." Exactly. And so we enjoy conspiracy theories, and we enjoy thinking that we've discovered something, and this makes us look for them, and 9 times out of 10 they're not there. Every now and then they are, but it's you have to be very careful with them. Nonetheless, I had all right, so we're gonna MPs moving towards the White House. So I'm gonna get on that in a minute, and we'll see what we can find out that's going on. The good news is, I imagine at this point the White House is going to be pretty reinforced to be able to disperse anything much better than they were yesterday. But we're going to stay on that and see what's going on. So everybody likes to believe conspiracy theories, and they like to believe that they have. Okay, and this is, by the way, okay, you're about to see here. This that was the officer, not the officer. That was the news reporter who had been shot by rubber pepper bullets. She and her crew came under fire. The protesters were on the right. She and her crew was on the left. You could see the entire row of officers were going down. One officer kind of broke off while all the other officers were going to the right. This officer went to the left and engaged them with a pepper gun. So, okay, this is one of the cars. I believe this car you're going to see is about to attempt to run over several. Okay, no, this was actually not the car I was thinking of, unfortunately. That one just sped off, and you can see why they'd be concerned, but nonetheless, there is one of a car that is actually chasing protesters, so we'll get to that. I apologize, we keep getting a little off track. The conspiracy theories about people being flown in for the protests, Trump is, I think, deliberately putting the gas on those, because it deflects all the blame from him. If he says, well, these aren't real protests, nobody's upset at me, nobody's upset at the U.S., we've got everything completely right, what people are really upset with is, or it's just really, and there's a lot of memes now that this is all done by George Soros, which is why they said, why would they attack CNN? Maybe it's trying to get people to think the other. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But Donald Trump is deliberately stoking these so that it deflects the attention from him, and it makes him look smart because he's like, oh, look, I can see through it. This is why he also does the people say. He does that all the time. People are saying, I've been told. What that really means is he made it up. And the way I know that is because he's never once identified a source, and nobody's ever willing to come out and say who told him. And the reason is because nobody told him. It's just, he just believes this shit. So, but I will say this. The first time I grew up in a wealthy suburban white neighborhood. The town was Wellesley, Massachusetts. Really almost on par with Beverly Hills. And they had a program where they took disadvantaged inner city students, all minorities, and bussed them into the school every single day to give them an opportunity to have a higher education, better learning than they might get on inner city in inner city Boston. Now, this program was resented universally across the board. The students who were bussed in hated it because they felt like it was a pity fest, and everybody was like, oh, you poor black kids who can't take care of yourselves, come into the white neighborhoods and we'll take care of you and we'll give you our better education. We'll show you how it's done. So they really resented it for the most part. A lot of the white students resented it too. And the teachers. I was amazed how many of the teachers there were openly hostile about it. I'm not racist, but I've noticed that most of the fights at this school, the kids that were busing in, they make up 5-10% of the kids at the school, but they make up 60 to 80% of the fights, which was true. But I remember thinking about it and saying, I'd have an attitude if I was them too. I'd be pissed. And I remember speaking to one of them once, and this is my first real understanding of the fact that there are different Americas. There's a different culture depending on who and where you are. And this to me was one of the most foreign things I'd ever heard. I was speaking to one of them, and he was a friend of mine, and I respected him and I trusted him. And he said once that he had an elder brother. And his older brother said, come on, I want to show you something. They went down to the corner, and there were 2 police officers at that corner. And they were trying to get some of the black kids there to take a gun. And the reason was there had been a shooting. And what the officer said was, oh, we know who did it. He's over there in that building here. This gun can't be traced. Now you go take this gun. We're your friends. And we want to make sure that you guys can defend yourselves and take care of yourselves. So we want you to, take this and you do what you got to do. We're just going to look the other way. And I got that was the most shocking thing. A privileged white kid, Massachusetts. I couldn't believe it. But I looked at my friend, and he was serious. This is what he had seen. This is what he saw. It was unambiguous. And I'd heard stories like this before, but it didn't make... imagine the difference in the people who live those lives. So he's telling me about police officers who I had always loved and respected. I mean, I really did. I respected the police. I knew police officers. I had police officers in my family. And to hear that any would do this was very hard to believe, but I trusted him, and he was telling the truth. And we've heard these stories, but especially for white people with my background, it's immensely difficult to fathom. It's just so different. It's so alien. But I remember he and I were going out of the school, and we weren't really talking. It's not that we were pissed at each other, but we'd had a very long discussion. And I've always been interested in engaging people in controversial topics. So he and I have been speaking for hours after school about this, but we're leaving. And all of a sudden, this girl that I knew, she had just had her birthday, and she comes out of the building just distraught, tears streaming down her face. Nobody could console her. And I was just like, what's wrong? Everybody was trying to figure it out. And from what I could piece together, she had just turned 18. And her father had given her the wrong color BMW for her birthday. And I'm sitting there having just spoken to a friend of mine and defended to him that we're not all that different, that I don't live in that different, and she's inconsolable. She got the wrong colored BMW for her birthday, and I've almost never seen anyone this upset in my life. I'm in high school, and I'm just looking at this friend of mine who missed the bus home. It's an hour and a half for him from there to get back to his inner city neighborhood where there's violence and gunshots every night, and where we sit there and say, well, you just learn, because anyone can learn in that environment, right? You can why didn't you do your homework? Why didn't you? And that was my first lesson in seeing people who live in the same state that I do, within an hour or two from me, and live such a different life. It was so to answer the question, and we're going to have to get back to what's actually happening today, but I wanted to tell that story because I think it's important to realize how different things are for whites and blacks in general in this country. And what we're seeing here is a result of people who have not felt understood. This, I believe, is Portland. Yeah, this is what you're seeing here is Portland. Although actually, I believe that one's Portland last night. So that's not Portland today. It's Portland last night. Although I believe now there are. I think in Portland there are some buildings that have been damaged. So that is Portland from a little less than 24 hours ago. So I was going to say end of lecture, but those of you who know, there's going to be more stories. But I think both sides. I hope both sides can learn something from that. And I think the privileged side has a bit more to learn than others. So let's go over what we know so far. There's we've been cycling through. This isn't actually a standard feed. This is a collection of clips that we have gathered from the last 24 hours. In some cases, I can tell you where they are. Some of these clips are 3 or 4 hours old. Some are from, so for example, that I believe is Portland that you're seeing now. We have a clip from the 3rd precinct on fire when it was overrun 3 days ago. Several clips from Los Angeles and Beverly Hills. I'm going to bring up again. So what we're about to show you is a picture of Beverly Hills about, now I think it's 5 or even 6 hours ago. This here is downtown Beverly Hills. That is an estimated 20,000 people protesting. To the best of my knowledge, the Beverly Hills protest has been completely peaceful. There hasn't been any, and there's there was an image here. Let's bring up the other one. We've got one more of protesters actually respecting police lines here. This is also in Beverly Hills. And then this here that we're seeing is, this is bigger than Trump's inauguration. But then again, most Little League games are bigger than Trump's inauguration. So what we have is roughly the same number. There's a couple of extra cities that are having protests today than last night. Roughly somewhat over 30 U.S. cities have protests. A number of them are turning into riots and violent, but we don't know how many. It looks like at least 8 or 9, and 25 cities have imposed curfews, and 8 states have deployed the National Guard. The cities that are currently under curfew orders in California, it's Beverly Hills and Los Angeles. Denver, Colorado, Miami, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, Chicago, Illinois, Louisville, Kentucky, Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, Rochester, New York, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, and Toledo, Ohio, Eugene and Portland, Oregon, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, uh, Charleston and Columbia, South Carolina, Nashville, Tennessee, Salt Lake City, Utah, Seattle, Washington, and uh, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The states that have deployed the National Guard are Minnesota, Georgia, Ohio, Colorado, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Utah, Texas, and the District of Columbia have, as of this moment, all deployed the National Guard as of this moment. And then we have reports now that there appears to be another march on that there is another march on the White House. I apologize. We've been getting a lot of things. There definitely appears to be some collateral damage. There was a child who was hit in the head with a rubber bullet. He was, it's estimated, 12 years old. He was knocked unconscious, bleeding profusely, and had to be taken to the hospital. There is no word on his condition yet. We have had a number of. Okay, so there's the. Yep, they're in Washington, D.C. We know. Okay, armed forces are moving near the White House. There's no report as to whether those are protesters or. And we also know, okay, so tear gas apparently it is being or has been recently deployed near the White House. Union Square Station is all right. So I'm going to start to try to figure out how we can start to try to gather this information. As I said before, as it has been for the last couple of nights, it's been coming in pretty. There's been a lot coming in that's been very difficult to process and to try to keep. One of the things the reason I brought up the story of my high school is because that was the first time I learned that there were in fact police officers who, and as I later became more familiar with the criminal defense system in Massachusetts and in the country as a whole, I did learn that there were officers, and that this was, and in Massachusetts, when we were having difficulties with mob violence, the thinking was, well, really what we should do is let one mob boss know which was the other mob boss that whacked his brother at the toll booth or wherever, and if we just let them, take each other out, saves us a lot of dangerous work. And obviously, we would not. I'd like to think nobody here would condone that or think that that was a good idea, but we do. I can see how you can get there, but I apologize, but it goes from there to, again, gang violence inside the inner cities, where police officers say, hey, that gang over there wiped out your brother, here's some weapons, go do that. And they have this bizarre relationship with the police, which is the inverse of anything that I'm accustomed to, anything that most of us have seen. So we have this claim now of a pallet of bricks being dropped off and near some rioters. It's entirely possible it was put there by somebody looking to stir the pot. We've had a number of incidents like that, and people manufacturing incidents on either side, trying to blame either the protesters or the police officers for things that haven't happened. It might be that those bricks genuinely belong there. It may be they were supposed to be delivered somewhere else, and the guy who was supposed to deliver them said, fuck this, I ain't going through, I'm dropping them off here, and I'm just going to say I lost them to the looters. It's impossible to know. It is possible the police officers dropped them off. And that's difficult for a person of privilege like myself to accept. It's absolutely possible, and it's not as improbable as I would like it to be. So, what we're going to do now is we have another video that I'd like to try to show. And let's see if we can get this. I'm hoping this may or may not come up. This is going to be a video. This is Jake Tapper, who, I think it's Jake Tapper, actually. I believe it is. Said something I thought was rather poignant. One of the things that concerns me here is, and it's impossible to opine without being accused of virtue signaling, and I think especially when we're in the media in some way or another, that's tempting. But what I'm going to do here is play this clip, if I can get it to run, and I hope you will listen. I thought it was an interesting clip, and it speaks to what I was speaking about earlier. So this is CNN's Jake Tapper.
The rebels lighting fires. It isn't the media exposing the reality. The problem is the reality. Just look at the last 3 months. Forget about policing. Look at the toll of the pandemic. More people of color are getting sick and dying. Why? Less access to care. More minorities are losing their jobs at a faster rate. Yet they make up the higher percentage of those at work right now in jobs deemed essential. Imagine how that feels. Helping more and being helped less. They stand a greater chance, minorities, of getting stopped for wearing and not wearing masks. Those government small business loans, they didn't go evenly to the majority and minority. Most went to the majority. In one America, people rage for the freedom to get a haircut and a tattoo. The other is raging just to be seen and heard. One America says they won't wear a mask because when they jog, it's uncomfortable, not necessary. It's an affront to their liberty. One has renewed fear that going for a jog could get you killed. One America insists their need for football is so sacrosanct, there can be no kneeling protest on the sidelines. Sons of bitches. But is not outraged by a cop kneeling on this man's neck? Doesn't make it okay to riot, says the majority. But doesn't it depend why it's happening? A riot in Boston Harbor started the fight that amounted to America. Cities burned across the continent in 1968, again at Stonewall. In each of those cases, it was the minority manifesting a desperate plea to be heard and for change, just like now. A friend of mine, celebrated American and African American, asked me in a broken voice, why doesn't America love us? Why do they do this to us? And he wasn't just talking about this latest case, he was talking about all of it. And by America, he meant me. He meant you, the white majority. And you can listen to those who put it on the minorities. Violent. It isn't the rebels lighting fires. It isn't the media exposing the reality. The problem is the reality. Just look at the last 3 months. Forget about policing. Look at the toll of the pandemic. More people of color are getting sick and dying. Why? Less access to care. More minorities are losing their jobs at a faster rate. Yet they make up the higher percentage of those at work right now in jobs deemed essential. Imagine how that feels.
Like I said, I think it's hard, and it does. It's hard, I think, for people who are living the Black American experience in this country to understand how privileged white America lives and how they can be so ignorant of it. And I think it's very difficult for privileged white Americans to understand just how bad things are. And that's why the story that I gave earlier of, again, a high school kid, a friend of mine, who his brother had been offered a gun by a police officer to go avenge the shooting of a friend of his. And that, again, if it had come from anyone else, I would not have believed it. And even then, I didn't want to call him a liar to his face, but I also didn't understand. Nobody I knew would even have the imagination to make something like that up. And there is a large percentage of the U.S. population that lives that all the time. So when you're asked what is The what do they want? They want to see an end to that. They want to see a change to the culture where uh, I'm actually going to do. I think I'm going to try to do one more picture that I always found rather moving, but I'll look for that in a second. They want to see both Americas on a much more equal footing, the black experience and the white experience. And by the way, it's easy to mistake then and say, well, if we fix that, then all our problems are fixed. No, there's still gender issues. There's still this is a staggering divide in this country that is more than just about any other place other than perhaps South Africa during the height of the, well, I shouldn't say perhaps. South Africa during apartheid was far worse, and even now is still bad. But this is the U.S. is not a role model for social equality by any stretch of the imagination, and we like to repeat loud and oft that we are the best country in the world, but we are if you're a CEO in this country, if you're making billions of dollars and don't have to pay taxes on it and have, but for everybody else, there are degrees of significant difficulty. So we have today at 11:20 Eastern Standard Time, 30 plus cities in which there are protests and riots breaking out in a number of them, at least 8. 25 of those cities now have curfews. Those 25 are Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, Denver, Miami, Atlanta, Chicago, Louisville, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Rochester, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, Toledo, Eugene, Portland, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Charleston, Columbia, Nashville, Salt Lake City, Seattle, and Milwaukee all have curfews tonight, and people are being ordered to stay at home. We have reports of some kind of movement towards the White House, and presumably armed is what I've heard. We haven't been able to substantiate that, and we do not know yet whether that is a police or military movement or movement of another kind. We do have fires in well, I don't know if there are any more fires, but we certainly did have fires in Portland now, where there's at least some evidence of burned out buildings. Atlanta, New York has a number of destroyed police vehicles, and the National Guard has been deployed in 8 states. Those states are Minnesota, Georgia, Ohio, Colorado, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Utah, Texas, and the District of Columbia. So, there is a lot going on. So what I think we're going to do, we're going to try to get back to what we know and don't know about what's going on tonight. We do know that Donald Trump has suggested that he will bring in the military to deal with these protesters. We know that yesterday there was a very tense situation when a number of protesters, after having broken into the U.S. Treasury offices and vandalized some of those Treasury building and vandalized some of those offices, moved on, damaged property and national monuments in Lafayette Park, and then moved to the White House. They dismantled the semi-permanent barriers at the front. They're temporary barriers, but they had been reinforced with handcuffs and wire, and they were able to dismantle about 20 feet of it. They then met a wall of Secret Service and Capitol Police officers, and at least one Secret Serviceman was hit in the head with a brick. The Secret Service then mounted essentially an offensive with tear gas and dispersed the crowd, which I think in general would like to be able to see protesting occurring. But when it's that close to the White House, if they start to penetrate that outer wall, snipers will start shooting at people, and you're going to end up with either them overtaking the White House, which would be really bad, or dead bodies on the White House lawn. So I think in that particular case, it was good that they got that done. But short of that, we are not in. So yesterday we saw several areas in Minneapolis being seeded. Oh dear Lord, this apologize. I'd heard of this video before, and what I'm seeing now appears to be. Um, so we've had reports of yesterday in Detroit a brown Ford sorry, not Ford Forester, sorry, a Bronco pulled up to a bunch of protesters, and a man from inside fired into the crowd, hit and killed a 19-year-old male protester. And what I'm looking at now is video. I don't know the source. It was posted about an hour ago. It looks legit, so I think we're gonna see if I can find a way to get it up here. But what I'm seeing is a man with a compound bow firing on protesters. We have a couple of other people injured. We have a boy, ostensibly 12 years old, hit in the head with a rubber bullet, bleeding, knocked unconscious, and taken to the ER. His status is not known. Several other people who have received some form of collateral fire from police. It's very confusing. So I'm conflicted about this footage of the man with the bow. So I think we're gonna prep it, but yeah, it's looks like it's a compound bow, um, hunting bow, compound bow. I mean, it's not a. I don't think it's necessarily an important distinction. All right, we'll take a look at it. Yep, that's what that is. And then we have reports of the Austin Police Department firing on people. I don't know. And then we have the woman who was hit. I think I had heard tracer around, but it may have been tracker. I don't know. So why don't you, if everyone could be patient for 1 minute while I try to, and we had a question earlier. Yes, Courtney Stewart is still a co-host of In Time, but she is often unavailable she can do scheduled broadcasts very easily, but for breaking news, she's not available. ProLib has actually he was a correspondent with us for a long time, and we asked that he also actually do guest hosting, especially on breaking news, and he graciously agreed. So he was with us for about 3 hours last night. We did another. Actually, yeah, last night's stream ended up being about 6 hours, but he was with us for 3 of those hours, and he's been with us for a lot. We've had a good relationship with him for a while, so it's nice to be able to. We haven't had him on for a while. We did have him back, and it's good to see him. So I've always enjoyed working with him, and I've had a number of opportunities to do that. So I think. I don't even know what town that is. Does anyone know anything about this crossbow before we air this? So this is and it was called somebody had called it a hunting bow. I mean, it's a compound bow. I can't tell if he's using broad or field points, but it's and why anybody would deliberately take a. I mean. All right, hold while I listen to this, please. All right, we're going to wait on that. So we have, there's a lot of very crazy reports coming in. What I'm looking at right now, yeah, I mean, I mean, it's not like extraordinarily graphic, but it's reasonably graphic. And so what we have is a unconfirmed report, and we have the footage, and it's actually almost loaded up so that I can play it. A man who took out a compound crossbow. He got out of his car and started just leveling it at various people, and then appears to have fired at least 2 or 3. It doesn't look staged, but I can't confirm that whether it is or is not. And then a large number of protesters. No, that's not going to be fake. Well, there's only 3 kinds of bows. There's a long bow, recurve, and compound. That was that was just a modern compound bow. Um, Everybody's learning a lot about me. I used to be a coach for archery, taught archery, and I'm still certified to set up ranges and do stuff like that. So you never know. And just in case there's a riot and some idiot comes out with a compound bow and starts, yeah, that's, all right. We'll get that queued up. And in the meantime, let's take a look at, again, it's now 11:30. We have protests still in roughly 30 states. Sorry, 30 protests in 30 cities. 8 states have activated the National Guard, and 25 cities have put in a curfew. So I think I'll do a rundown on that in a minute. This is in response to George Floyd. George Floyd was a black man who was arrested, I think, 4 days ago. He was arrested ostensibly for drunken disorderly and possibly for trying to pass counterfeit bills. He tried to pay for something with apparently money that was counterfeit. He yeah, okay, we'll queue up that video. He attempted to, he was in his car and was pulled out of his car. He appeared to be intoxicated enough that he couldn't really, he could respond, but he was sluggish. He ended up, they put ties on him. They asked him to get up and took him to the wall of the convenience store where he had been arrested. They had him sit. He was responding to commands. He appeared to be just fine. They picked him up, and then what happened after that, there's been some questions about. There was a purported video of him actually being put into the squad car and then getting beaten in the squad car. That is unconfirmed, and I haven't seen anything that can demonstrate to my satisfaction that we know that happened. But there is a footage of an officer that appears like maybe he was one of them hitting someone. There's just no way to know. And we haven't seen anyone else pick that up. But what we do know is at some point he was brought down to the ground and put against the wheel of the car. 2 officers sat on him while a third put his knee on his neck. The initial reports, which are now being modified slightly, but the initial reports were that after about 8 minutes of the knee on the neck that he became unresponsive. He had been complaining that he couldn't breathe. He had been complaining that he was in pain. There were many people there at this point who were recording it, who asked the police officers to stop. They did not, and then it was another 11 minutes of him being unconscious before the officer removed his knee. That's the latest confirmed version of the story that we know. After that, an ambulance came. They took him to the hospital, and he was pronounced dead at the hospital. The officers were summarily fired, all 4 of them. Rioting started that night. The next day, it went from 1 city to about 4. The next day after that, it went to about 30. That was last night, and we now have 30 again today. The officer who put his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck has been arrested and charged with murder 3, which is essentially manslaughter. It means the accidental killing of a human being. He's on $500,000 bail. His wife also filed for divorce less than 24 hours later. Then it also came out that he had 18 prior complaints against him, and was in fact involved in an incident that became famous during the primaries because I think it was Klobuchar's office had. I think I forget whether it was that she had declined to prosecute or what the deal was, but I think she was a ADA at the time. But at any rate, so he was involved in the death of a Native American, so he clearly has a record with this kind of thing. Yesterday, a preliminary report came out from the medical examiner's office saying or suggesting quite strongly that he did not kill Mr. Floyd, that he may have that Mr. Floyd died as a result of hypertension, pre-existing medical conditions combined with alcohol and extreme stress, and that he did not suffer any sort of a blunt force trauma to the trachea or his airway or neck. So I don't know if that becomes the official report. I don't know what's going to happen. I have to believe things are going to get worse. Right now, what we're seeing is, I mean, obviously there's a lot of scary stuff going on, but the number of deaths is reasonably, or severe injuries is reasonably small. I'd like to bring this up. When the human species has been around for 100,000 to 200,000 years, depending. For 99% of that, the news, your news source, your radius for getting news, your news came from the town crier. So your news source was about 30 feet, and people could. You could hear it from friends and neighbors, but for the most part, you didn't know what was going on in villages or towns next to you. Radio changed a lot of that. Television really changed that, but we are constructed in such a way that news is always local to us. That's just when we hear news, it is local. In our minds, it is local because that's all we ever were capable of hearing or understanding. So when we hear that there's mass murders happening in Russia, your mind actually gets triggered. Doesn't matter that it's the other side of the world. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It feels like it's close by. It feels like it can be, it can affect. We have 300 million Americans here, and there are riots in 30 cities, and there are some, like I said, we showed the picture of the Houston, I think it was, a police chief who was actually with the protesters. And we have some stories of, in fact, actually there is one other video I'd like to get up of some pretty heroic things and some pretty spectacular things going on. And as you can see here, some pretty terrible things. But as a country, we've been facing COVID-19. We've been facing, we faced wars, World War II. We faced worse and we faced harder. And this is a symptom of a much bigger problem. And we need to address the problem. But what we're seeing here, as intimidating as it can be, is it's not the experience for all of us here today. So let's try to keep that in mind. What I'm going to do is I'm going to allow a couple of these videos to play. This one I think that you're seeing here is Los Angeles. And I'm going to queue up another video. So if you could all give us one break. In fact, I think I'm also actually going to quickly get something to drink. I'm a little parched. So what we will do is you will be able to look at Ethan's gorgeous face over there. And we have a healthy live chat. I will be back momentarily. And we will continue with our coverage and sort of try to figure out where things stand at the present time. And I think we probably will show when we come back. I think we're going to show that footage. It is a little disturbing, but I think it's. I think we're going to need to show that. So. That will be the man with the crossbow. I'm going to make one more double check and to see if we can verify it. It looks genuine to me, but we will get into it. So I will be back in just a few minutes. Thank you. Excuse me. All right, I've gotten a little more hydrated. And we're going to do a rundown and see where things stand in a minute. I've also put up a few things here. So we got a couple of things that I wanted to, people had said in the live chat to just catch up. So Atheist Swede, a member at In Time, thank you very much, pointed out that, that I'd heard this before, that there were officers in New York who were posing as protesters, and what they were doing was getting involved in the riot and stirring up trouble and all this other stuff, and that they had on white armbands. Yes, I've seen pictures of people wearing white armbands. I have a very hard time believing that. I, that again, we spoke about that at the top of the show. I don't entirely know what purpose that would serve. I know what, again, if you're going to look for a conspiracy theory, I know what you could say ostensibly. Oh, they want to cause trouble so that they can smack the protesters down. I don't think there are too many people who at this point think that violence against the protesters is going to solve this. I think that would have quite horrific consequences, and I don't see individual police departments doing that. So yes, I've seen the pictures of people wearing the white armbands. I've seen the suggestion that these are police officers. I've seen no evidence of that. We also saw last night, we had footage of a man smashing windows, and somebody said, "Oh, yep, I walked up to this guy and said, 'Hey, are you a cop?' And he said, 'Yeah.'" And he quit. I can't believe if the police are doing this and trying to inflame tensions, that they're going to admit that I don't. That belies credulity to me. I think. I mean, I'm not going to rule it out, but it doesn't sound right. And so I think unless we were able to see really some sort of conclusive proof, I would I'd be disinclined to believe that. Now we've put up a statement. We put up a picture there that I particularly like. So I want to read two statements to you. The first one is from Pistons coach Dwayne Casey, and you see that up there on the right. And it reads as follows. 54 years ago, I was an 8-year-old boy living in rural Kentucky when the schools were desegregated. I walked into a white school where I was not wanted nor welcomed. At that time, there were no cell phones to record my treatment, no cable news stations with 24/7 coverage, no social media to record the reality of the situation or to offer or to support or condemn. But I can remember exactly how I felt as an 8-year-old child. I felt helpless. I felt as if I were neither seen nor heard, nor understood. Apologies. I have watched the events unfold in the days following the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, a city where I coached and once called home. I see how many people continue to feel these same feelings: helpless, frustrated, invisible, angry. I understand the outrage because it seems the list continues to grow. Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. The injustices continue to mount, and nothing seems to be changing. 44 years later, my son is now 8 years old, and I look at the world he is growing up in and wonder how much has really changed. How often is he judged on sight? Is he growing up in a world where he is seen and heard and understood? Does he feel helpless? Will he be treated like George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery? What have we really done in the last 54 years to make his 8-year-old world better than mine was? We all have to be and do better. We have to change the way we see and hear each other. We have to work together to find solutions to make the political justice system work. Black, white, and brown people have to work together to find new answers. The only way we can stop the systemic problems that people of color have faced all our lives is through honesty and transparency. We have to understand why people are at their limit at this moment. It takes empathy in its truest form. It takes a cultural shift. It takes action. Let's stop the injustice now. Let's not allow another generation to continue to live in a world where they are treated as unequal. Now is the time for real change. That is Pistons coach Dwayne Casey. Yeah, so we have, like I said, yeah, there's what I think I'm actually probably going to do at this point. We're going to read at least one more statement that I think is worth taking a look at. We're going to do one more rundown and see where we are, but actually, we haven't had anything huge post in the last hour, and I am unfortunately getting rather tired, and neither Ethan nor Courtney are available today. So let's see where we stand in the next 10 or 15 minutes in regard to what's happening so far. It looks like the curfew is being obeyed in a number of cities, but I honestly don't. Like I said before, there's really quite a bit going on. The other thing I wanted to read is from Teresa Horn, and let's read this. This is social media. It's got, I think, like 25,000 retweets, which is, I don't even know if that's big anymore. Here's my take on the riots in Minneapolis. As a teacher, when a student wrecks a classroom, throws things, breaks things, slams things, and completely melts down, that's called trauma. We're supposed to respond by standing with that child, love that child, and working to heal. What is happening in Minneapolis and has happened in other places, to me, is an act of trauma. A kind of trauma that no white person in America can fathom. A kind of trauma that's source is deep, evil, and generational. It stems from slavery, oppression, torture, and long-standing hate. George Floyd's murderer is a clear martyr of this reality. The reaction is trauma. Why wouldn't we respond by standing with black people, loving black people, and working hand in hand with our black communities in order to heal? Black lives matter. Black trauma matters. Tony Designs is asking if we have any new information on the bow and arrow attack in Salt Lake City. I don't have anything new. I'm going to quickly check again. My concern about sharing it is this, which is that I see the pictures with the armbands and a few people. There definitely are people who are wearing armbands. Again, it seems almost too. Okay, so we have a window broken at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. It still isn't actually as bad. It doesn't feel to me as bad as it did last night when we had the break-in at or the breach at the Treasury offices and the marching towards the White House. I think so. My concern about it, which is it's awfully inflammatory. I do think at this point we've talked about it enough that I think we're going to show it. But it's it's pretty intense. So let's. I'm gonna queue up this video, and what we're gonna show here appears to be a man in Salt Lake City. This man pulled over, got out of his vehicle, pulled out a crossbow, and began firing at protesters. He claimed to do this as an American, claimed to do this because he loved America. I believe we have the sound echo issue resolved, so I think we're going to play this. And it seems genuine to me because of the what happens, but we'll play this, and I think we'll go from there.
Look at this! Why did you get my car? You call yourself an American? Yes, I'm American. All lives matter. That's right, but they won't matter until we're... Don't you dare! This is his car. This is his car. What the fuck? Fuck him up! Fuck that bitch up! Look at this.
So that is the footage. It's shocking. It's hard to believe it's real. It's also hard to believe it's faked. I don't. But apparently now, as I understand it, his car was destroyed after this. I don't know the condition of that gentleman. There's some crazy stuff happening out there. So yeah, and then we have I think what one would expect in this case, which is Ethan and I spoke about this last night, which is stir crazy really is a thing. And I think there are a lot of people right now who have been locked away in their houses. They haven't been able to go out and do much of anything. I think you do that long enough, people start to consider rioting anyway, truth be told. I think you have a lot of racial tension between communities and police officers. I think the death of Mr. Floyd touched that off, and I think with a population that many people are out of work, haven't had anything to do, and a lot of long-standing frustration, and it has erupted into this. And please don't mistake that for me saying that there aren't very legitimate complaints that just have to be addressed. But I think there's a lot going on that is causing a lot of tension in this country. There's already been tension, but I think Ethan had said a perfect storm. I don't know that I want to say that because it's an overused expression, but I think there's a tremendous amount of frustration, and we're seeing some of the really, again, 300 million people in this country, and some of them are truly insane. Now, I had earlier said I think that was Los Angeles. That was actually Philadelphia. So there's Philadelphia. This is Miami now that you're taking a look at. Miami in this footage, Philadelphia about 10 seconds ago. I believe that's New York. So let's do a brief rundown of what we have, and then I think how we're going to proceed for the rest of the evening. We have George Floyd's brother has come out and said that he has spoken with Donald Trump, that he or Donald Trump called him. He said he didn't speak with Donald Trump. He said, quote, Trump didn't give me an opportunity to even speak, Floyd said. It was hard. I was trying to talk to him, but he just kept like pushing me off, like, I don't want to hear what you're talking about. And I told him I want justice. I said that I couldn't believe that they committed a modern day lynching. I asked Vice President Biden, I have never had to beg a man before, but I asked him, could he please get justice for my brother? I need it. I don't want to see him on a shirt just like other guys. Nobody deserves that. Black folk don't deserve that. We're all dying. Black lives matter. I have a political leaning. I try to watch narratives that feed into that, including people who say Donald Trump are doing things that I quite frankly think is quite indicative of his behavior as I know it and understand it so far, and this is certainly one of them. But this is a man whose brother has just died, and I think he's looking to be heard, and I have heard many presidents spend time with grieving widows, wartime presidents, which Donald Trump has been very proud of, the fact that he is, in his words, a wartime president. We've had Republicans and Democrats who have had to fulfill that solemn duty in speaking with the spouses of deceased servicemen and women, and to thank them for their sacrifice and try to find a way to help them make sense of the world. And it's been done by presidents that I love and presidents that I despise. Never have I heard it described in this manner, where they didn't even allow him to speak. As of this moment, again, violent protests have erupted in 30 cities across the United States, at least 30 cities across the United States. 25 have issued curfews across 16 states. The cities are Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, Denver, Miami, Atlanta, Chicago, Louisville, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Rochester, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, Toledo, Eugene, Oregon, Portland, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Charleston, South Carolina, Columbia, Nashville, Salt Lake City, Seattle, and Milwaukee. All are now under the effect of a curfew. We have in 8 states the National Guard being deployed. Those are Minnesota, Georgia, Ohio, Colorado, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Utah, Texas, and the District of Columbia. New York, most noticeably, not on that list. I'm not entirely sure how or why. So we do have more. We're seeing a lot. One thing we do try to do on In Time, I remember our very first, and I think I am going to probably start wrapping up, and I'll explain how and why and where we plan to proceed. But the very first broadcast that In Time ever did, we were preparing this interface, actually, the interface you're seeing here, one of the earlier iterations of it, for handling breaking news. We had decided we wanted to do culture and politics. We were going to bring on people, experts, to talk about a wide variety of issues, culture, politics, science, but we were also going to cover breaking news. And if there were big news events, you'd be able to come on In Time. We would bring on experts, correspondents. Ethan was, in fact, our first political correspondent. And we have a number of them. We have a philosophy correspondent, believe it or not, just in case someone ever solves Hume's problem of induction. But we're preparing the interface for the broadcast that was going to be in about 2 days' time. And we had on a web browser that would integrate into the interface, and all of a sudden breaking news just flashed across it. And I'm sitting there going, no, there must be something wrong. And I check, nope, there's real breaking news. So I called up Ansgar, who was my co-host at the time, and I was like, do you really want to do this now? We're not quite ready. He goes, yeah, I think we're that stupid. So we fire the thing up and go do the breaking news. It was 6 officers shot and taken hostage in Baltimore. And we covered it. We covered it for 6 to 8 hours, I think, and I would collate all the news from various sources while he would be going over social media. And he had found a woman who was selling concessions. She had strapped a basket to her head, put in M&Ms, Twizzlers, gummy bears, the whole 9 yards in the basket. She had a fanny pack, and she was going around selling concessions. We have the picture. We bring it up every now and then. It was pretty crazy, and she was inside the danger zone. She was actually right at the police line, but the police line was too close, and they couldn't move it back because there were too many people watching. So we have this culture in the U.S. of commercialism. She's selling concessions to a live shootout. We have guns like there's not. I mean, how many people die on average in Japan? Much higher population density than we have from guns, 4 to 7 a year. We have, just off the cuff, if I remember correctly, 30, 40,000 a year. So we, one of the things that's always been ingrained in time is pulling from social media and letting people know what's going on in social media and how the responses are. We have to be a little careful with it. That bow attack that we just showed, again, looks legit to me. It could be fake. I could see how it could be faked. It cuts at a few key times, but there's enough reports of it now that we're gonna show it. But we do try to be very careful about this. What I will say is there's a lot of claims out there. So as we start to wrap this up, there are claims the police officers are being involved in. There was the claim of the pallet that we discussed, where there was a pallet of bricks that showed up mysteriously at a police corner. There are any number of ways it could have gotten there. One of those ways, absolutely, is police or some other organization trying to incite violence. That's absolutely one of the ways it could have happened. And a lot of the more privileged in America sit there and say, no, that wouldn't, absolutely, that could be it. I'm not convinced it was, but it's one of many things that could explain a pallet of bricks suddenly showing up by the protest. The other one that I think is entirely possible was there was no construction sites in the area, but maybe a construction worker was taking the bricks to a construction site, said, whoa, there are protests, I've emptied out the bricks, that just drives off and says, oh, somebody stole my bricks, I don't know what happened, so he doesn't have to go through the protest area. I don't know, there's a million ways. But we also have a lot of photos of people in New York who have white armbands, and it's been said that these may be police officers that are, quote, undercover and trying to incite more violence. It's possible getting that kind of conspiracy done in an impromptu way, even days after. I think they got their hands full with other things. I don't think police officers in New York are actually trying to make things worse. It's possible. I've heard crazier things, but not by much. So, as we wrap this up, we are going to say that, and we have this photo here that I like, and we showed the photo earlier of the chief of the Houston police actually marching with protesters, side by side with protesters. There's a lot of ugly things going on social media. More of it is true than I am pleased with. More of it is true than I care to think about. That bow thing, I wouldn't have aired it if I didn't think that it was probably real. So, and there's enough corroboration on it now that I suspect that happened. Or I should say, it wasn't staged. There was a lot of people. That didn't look staged to me. But so there's guy in the Ford Bronco we talked about pulls up to a crowd and just starts shooting. Killed a 19-year-old kid yesterday. Let's not let social media tell us what's true and what's not. Don't let In Time tell you what's true and what's not. We check these things about as thoroughly as we can, but we are a live show in the middle of and we have a lot of support. We have a lot of support. And I'd like to thank the people, and they know who they are, and I'm going to send them thanks later in our Discord. And if you haven't come into our Discord, join us in our Discord. If you don't know what Discord is, it's a great way for communities to share information and stay in touch. We'll drop the link to the Discord. In fact, it's also in the description right now. But we have a lot of people who've been very helpful. Thank you to everyone who's been doing that. Thank you to my co-hosts, ProLib and Courtney, neither of whom could make it tonight. But we do our best. Every now and then we get it wrong. I'm very proud of the things that we got right. And that we got right ahead of national media. But sometimes we get it wrong. Keep a critical eye out, especially of social media. I think it's important. That's why it's a cornerstone of this show. That's why we work with it. But like a lot of tools, pretty soon when all you have is a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail. People who are good with social media start to think that everything on social media is true. There has been an active campaign by the Russian state to undermine the U.S. and largely through its social media. And it's had staggering efficacy. But somebody had pointed out right now, we don't need them to be undermining us. We're undermining ourselves. We're taking photo. Everything's a conspiracy. Everything's Antifa. Trump actually said that he heard that all of the protesters outside the White House yesterday were flown in, all of them. That's insane. That couldn't possibly be true. At least one of them can't have been flown in. And a conspiracy like that, people are going to know. But I see somebody post on Twitter, well, I have a brother who works at American Airlines, and he said all these. No. And there's a reason those stories seem compelling. They're written to be compelling. If I'm going to write a conspiracy theory, I'm not going to sit there and say, I saw it. I'm going to say, oh, my brother told me from this, and that makes it more compelling. They're being written by people who know how to sell an idea. Not professionals, but they know how to sell an idea. So I would like to remind people that, bricks have appeared on. That is, I will confess, that's starting to get bizarre. Okay, yeah, that's starting to get bizarre. So we just dropped on the Discord a picture of bricks in uptown Dallas, a whole bunch of bricks. Nobody knows how they got there. I will say this: bricks don't just spontaneously appear places. This isn't a pallet. This looks like they were stacked. Ostensibly, somebody would have seen if these had, the other thing is that the eye catches different things at different states. You could walk by all these bricks and never notice them, and then all of a sudden there are riots going on. Like, wow, when did those bricks get there? So it's weird. I've seen weirder. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But please stay skeptical about the things that you see on social media and the things that are going on. And what we're going to do. Yep, another pile of bricks down. But yep. So now we're getting lots of brick stories. It's the biggest thing is I don't see as much as it seems intuitive why the police might want the protesters to get even more enraged, because then they have an excuse to come down on them and to try to end all this. Very few police officers actually want to do that, and what's more importantly, very few police chiefs want to do that. They don't want to put their own men in the way, in the line of fire. They don't want to attack communities, and they're aware that these are upset people, and they don't know what's going to happen if there's more violence, because it may enrage people more. 30 cities have protests across the U.S. tonight. I don't think adding violence is in very many people's minds, at least on the police side. It does appear to be on Trump's mind, and I don't say that glibly as a joke, or it does appear to be on his mind. I think he's interested in showing that he's a leader, and he believes that comes from not just the application and use of power, but the reckless use of power. Believe it or not, I think he's impressed with himself when he acts without consideration for anything. Just make a decision and go, right or wrong, stand by it. That's what impresses himself the most. So, short of that, there aren't very many people, I think, on either side that want to see the violence escalate. What we're going to do now is I think we're going to take a break in the broadcast unless there is breaking news on a national level. I think we will consider recapping the events tomorrow. But it's been a long night for all of us. We did a 6.5 hour stream last night that went until about 6 a.m. And so I think we're all tired. I hope you've got a pretty good picture of what's going on, sufficient enough that I think you're also aware. I am for people who want to protest. I think that's one of the only ways to affect change. And I've been in protests myself, but I think being stupid isn't a good idea either. Stay away from places where violence is erupting, even to watch, because we have a number of innocent people, and don't bring your kids. And I don't mean that as, but there's been, all right. And I do, of course, just as I'm doing this, we've got pictures from DC, a live stream from DC. I see a little fire there. a little, but it's, I mean, there's crowds, but there's police. It looks like everything else. So yeah, I think we're gonna go down for a little while. We're gonna keep an eye on the news. If there is breaking news, if something significant happens, we will come back and we will go live. But short of that, I think we're gonna take a break. Everybody here has been up for a little while. I would like to thank Atheist Swede. I'd like to thank Bregwin. I would like to thank our Patreons. I'd like to thank Courtney and Ethan. I'd like to thank Tony Designs, all of our mods who have been here tonight, yesterday, who have been contributing to the news and helping us get this to people as accurately as possible in a very rapid and short period of time. So thank you all. I do want to do one more check of something. I want to just double check the live chat and make sure that we're all sort of on the same page. And like I said, we'll take a break and we'll either end up doing, we'll do a wrap up, or we'll, I think we're going to figure out where to go based on. Jake, fourth dimension in time. It doesn't take the police. It takes only one racist officer. That's true. That's a very fair point, and I think that's important to understand for a number of reasons. But I will counter that with another point, which is I'm not saying that the bricks weren't placed there. I said, and to cause harm. I said that the police did it was one possibility. I had given another possibility too, which was it could be another agent on either side trying to cause harm, or it could just be a coincidence from any number of. So. But if you're going to say that, hey, maybe it was just one random police officer, that's possible. But at that point, why wouldn't it just be one random guy like the guy with the bow? You know, I don't see any evidence that guy was a police officer. There are people doing some really crazy, stupid things on both sides, and some of them are police officers, and we've shown some of it. We showed several assaults by police officers. So please, I'm not trying to say they're not capable of it, but just in terms of credulity, if somebody put a pallet of bricks where they could be reached by protesters, that doesn't even mean it was the police. And I think in general, very few would want to do it. And if it was one police officer, that's a huge problem. But I don't think you can blame the police in general for that. There are cultural issues, and we'll get to that. I'm going to ramble if I don't want anymore. So was there anything else? Nope, I think that just about covers it. So fourth dimensional Jake says that he's heard reports that National Guard is in Seattle and that 2 assault rifles were stolen from a police car that was set on fire. We have had a number of police cars that have been destroyed, and I have been concerned about the weapons in those cars. Those are usually secured in the trunk, both because the trunk is locked and then they're actually bolted in the back. But yeah, and we also had the report of the APC stolen yesterday, but it turns out that was stolen not yesterday, but 4 years ago. just a one from a while back. That was, I think, Philadelphia. This is Miami that you're seeing here again. We've done that. So I'm going to keep an eye on it. There are a number of people who keep an eye on it who have my number, and I actually have my call on override, so I could be asleep and then my phone will ring and my wife goes, "If you go broadcast, I'll divorce you." And I say, "Really? Is that a promise?" Wait, I think I may have just revealed too much personal. Nobody heard that, right? Can we go back, Tony? Is there a way to go back and just erase the last 30 seconds? That may have been just too much TMI. Okay. So if something big happens, we'll be back. Please like and subscribe. If you haven't hit the thumbs up, give us a like if you're willing. That's always good for the channel. Subscribe is good for the channel. We will be having our Patreon hangout coming up on Monday, actually. So I think Monday is our Patreon hangout because it's the first Monday of the month. So if you become a patron, we can would love to chat with you. We got a lot of show ideas from that. We have a lot of our regular shows. Dr. Richard Carrier is coming on. I think he's next week. I think we're having Landon Knoll. We had to push back. We have a regular series with Landon Knoll on civics now, but we did have to push that back. We will be having Matt Dillahunty on to discuss the importance of debate. in conveying ideas. And so we look forward to seeing more of you guys and to actually having somewhat less breaking news for the rest of 2020. I'm not optimistic. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for your support. And please, this means more now than it used to. Stay safe and take care. Thank you.